Morning everyone, and thank you for joining me on the Sage Intelligence webcast. Today I'm going to take you through part 8 of the X Factor series that I've created, and I'm going to show you how to add macros to put those final touches on your financial reports. My name is Carmen and I'm the product specialist for Sage Intelligence. Just so that you are aware, today's webcast will be recorded and provided to you via email. All participants are muted for the duration of the webcast, but please feel free to type any questions in the Q&A control panel or email me afterwards at carmen.grisel@sage.com. So what I want to cover today. Firstly, I want to just cover the financial report designer and how you can create layouts and then customize them for your customers or yourself. And then I want to show you how to create a macro which is based on a tip that we've provided in our tips and tricks for Sage Intelligence. We're going to tweak that macro so that it actually does more than what we wanted originally to do, so that you can then see the different options that you have when working with macros. I'm going to apply that macro to the layout and show you how that works. So firstly, you need to make sure you've got the latest report designer. So make sure you go to our sageintelligence.com site, go to resources, and there you'll find additional reports. Okay, once you're there, you select your integration and you can then go and select other reports if you want, but make sure you've got the latest financial report designer report. Okay, once you've got that, you can then go in and create your report layouts. Now, for today's purpose, I'm going to show you how to use the layout generator, and obviously you can also use the task pane, but I like to use the layout generator because it creates all that additional work for me and we only have a limited time in this session. Then I'm going to show you the macro as it comes standard, and then I want to show you how I tweaked it to basically do additional items for me and make life easier for the user that is using that particular report. As you can see in this one, I've applied all the macros that you could possibly have with this particular macro that I've used. So I've got a hide rows, which basically hides all the rows in a selected area that you've highlighted in the Excel workbook. And then you've also got a show 0 rows. So that also then shows you all your rows. And what I thought was, maybe you run out of report and you want to basically just confirm that you haven't hidden any accounts that have amounts in now. So I combined the hide and the show to basically give me an update selection. Then I was thinking, I was like, you know, what would be really cool is if we could possibly get a name range for my layout, and then it updates automatically on the name range. And I've basically created that as well, and I will share the code with you. Then I was like, okay, I know that my customers want to know about how to hide columns that aren't in use. So you're on period 6 and normally you've got a report 1 to 12, but you don't want to see additional columns that have no values in it. So I've basically tweaked the hide rows and show rows macro, and I've basically made it to hide my columns and show columns when necessary. And then I thought, wouldn't it be nice if you could do all of that in one go? And I basically created an update columns and rows so that the user can run out the report, update their columns and rows, and the report is updated with all the zeros for rows hidden and all the columns with zeros in it hidden. So that's what I'm going to take you through today. Okay, so let's go to my image. Just to show you how this all works, okay, the first layout I created using the layout generator was my current period. Okay, so what a user would do is they would run out their financial report. Because period 9 is my current period, let me just show you. I've used a VLOOKUP at the end here, and if I click on that, you can see it's pulling in my current period. I'm using Sage 300, but this will be valid for all the different integrations. So I've got period 9 at the top, and you can see I've got all these zeros that I may want to hide now. So as I mentioned, the tip actually tells you or gives you how to hide and show your selected area rows. So if I select all the cells here and I go up and click on hide, you can see it just hides my rows. I can then show those rows by clicking on the show rows. So as I mentioned, you may hide the rows the 1 month, and you come in next month and you know you've placed data into another account that didn't have amounts in it previously. So what you can do is I've basically joined the hide and the show to say update selection. So then it unhides everything and rehides the 0 rows. So it updates your layout. And then I mentioned to you that, a name range would be so much better, because now I'm having to go and select this and then select update selection. So what I did is, just to show you the name range, if I go to hide show columns or rows, you can see I've highlighted all the area that I want to basically check for 0 rows. So if I click out of that, now what I've done is I can click on update name range, and then that updates the whole report for me. If I scroll down, you can see there's only values. So I thought that was really cool. Then what I did is I said, okay, but now what happens if you got multiple columns and you want to then apply 0 rows to multiple columns? How would you do that? So I went and I created an income statement for 12 periods. And if I show you here, I'm just going to unhide that for now. You can see I've got no values inside my report, and I've got an actual current period, which is actually looking at this current period over here, and I've also got a calculation, which is just summing up the 12 months. Okay, so then what I did is I was like, okay, now I want to basically be able to hide any values that are any rows that have 0 for the total period that we're looking at. So I went in and I said hide rows on year-to-date figure, because technically if you're on the year-to-date, then that will only pull in your amounts in that you need. And I clicked on that, and then that went in and updated my report. Okay, I was like, okay, but maybe people don't want to actual year-to-date in their report. So you could create a calculated row, column, and then you can actually just hide this particular column, because your macro will look at it only, and then it can update. So then I was like, okay, let me do that, and I created the macro to actually look at the calculated row. So it's just selecting the correct row to hide the rows on. Then, as I mentioned before, you may get a customer that comes in and it was previously period 4 and now we're on period 5, and you want to update and remove any columns that you don't have. So then what I did is I said, let me just open that up. Okay, I said I want to basically update my columns, and then it basically hides my columns that I don't need. So if I change it to now period 8, I said I also want to hide and show my columns, and I want to hide and show my rows to make sure everything is valid and updated on my workbook. So if I click on update columns and rows, it first goes through and looks at my rows, and then it will go and update my columns. And now you can see I got period 8 there. So that's what I show you today, and I'm going to start with my report and how you would get there. Okay, so I'm going to close this down to not cause any confusion. Okay, and inside the report manager, okay, what you need to do is you need to make sure you're on the latest financial report designer. Okay, for 300 it's 1-4, and I've made a copy of it and I've named it Financial Report Designer with hard columns and rows. Just some useful tips here. Make sure you give it a relevant name and put in the description what version of the financial report designer you're using. That helps a lot. Okay. When you click apply, it's automatically going to change your name. And as you can see, this is not a macro enabled template yet, but we'll change that in a moment. Then I ran the report out and selected the parameters required. Once I've done that, and I've jumped ahead and run the report out for us, I can then go and create my income statement using the layout generator. So I'm going to go to manage. I'm going to click on income statement, actual versus budget, and I'm going to make a copy of it. Click OK. Again, I'm going to go to columns and I'm going to clear all those columns. I'm then going to type in current, select actual current period, and then I'm going to go back to my layout and select my properties or my parameters for the report. I'm going to make sure I have show account details, and I'm going to click generate. Okay. So what I also worked with when I created this layout, and why I like using the layout generator, it just sets everything up for me. Okay. I may want to then go and customize it further. So I'm just going to hide currency. And I'm going to hide that because not everyone has that in their integrations. I'm going to insert, oopsie, insert no, it's not working. There we are. I'm going to type in your current period, so that I can then change the months as I want. Okay. Again, I'm just going to hide these because we don't want to use those. Hide them, and we don't need those two. Hide that. Okay. So one of the main things I use when I create a layout is my data validation. So this is great for making lists. So at the bottom here, I'm going to say periods. And the first one I'm going to pull in there is my actual current period. And then I'm just going to say number, value, and then close that. And then I'm going to put 1 to 12. So then I've got an option whether I want the report to be a dynamic report, so when it runs and I can have the current period pull in, or I can actually then go and select the different periods I want. Okay. Then I'm going to use my data validation, and I will send these tips to you. I'm going to list, I'm going to select my data there. There we are. And I am going to click OK. So now I can then say period 9 for the current period, and then I would need to go and update my formulas. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can either click on it and then highlight the actual period and select the current period. Okay, and then I can copy that and paste that all the way down and copy formula. The same with cost of sales. I'll just go and update that as well. I'm sure you could use find and replace as well. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to select period 9, and I'm going to absolute reference it. Did I absolute reference these ones? Yes, I did. Okay, and I can then click and drag that down as well because of absolute referencing. So I've gone and done those ones for now, and now I want to show you how to access the developer tab and set your workbook up to pull in macros. The first thing you need to do is you go to your File menu, you go to Options, and then you go to your Customize ribbon, and you need to tick in Developer. So that is ticked, and then that will then allow you to have your Developer tab at the top. Once you got that open, okay, you can then go to Visual Basics, and we're going to work on this workbook. So I'm going to double click on that workbook, and it gives me a blank canvas to then go and paste that code that we give you in our tip. So I've got that available here. So inside our tip, we give you the hide rows as well as the show rows. Okay, so let me copy that, and I'm going to paste it into here, and I'm just going to remove that there. So that is the standard code that we give you in the tip, and what it does here, it's basically telling you that it will hide any 0 rows and in the selection that you've selected in the Excel workbook. If your cells that you've selected is greater than 1,000, it's going to give you a message box and tell you it might take some time. Then it checks to see if there is a value in that cell. If there isn't, it's going to hide that row for you. Then over here, it does the opposite. It basically, whatever you've selected, it's going to look at that particular cell, see, make sure you unhide all of those cells for you, and then basically you've got your standard report back again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and then it's going to ask me to save my Excel workbook. So because we're still busy working with it, I'm going to save it onto my desktop, and I'm going to save it as a macro enabled workbook. Now, note to self that you need to make sure you save it as a macro enabled workbook, otherwise you'll lose your code. Okay, so I'm going to click on save. And now what I can do is I can close that down, and I can do two things. I can create a button and run it off my layout, or I can go to Developer, click on Macros, and then you can see my macros over there. So now I can choose what I want to do. So firstly, I need to highlight my area. So if I highlight the cells that I want to do this macro on, I'm going to click on Developer, and then I'm going to click on Macros, and I'm going to say hide 0 rows. And you've got a run button at the top here. So we can click on that, and it's going to hide my rows. Now, not everyone wants to go to Developer and use that method. So let's go and add the buttons for hide and show rows. Okay, so under Developer, you'll see there's an insert. Click on that, and under the form controls, you can select a button, and then you can add a button to your report. And when you add a button, you can then assign a macro to it. So I'm going to say hide 0 rows, and I'm going to edit the text, and I'm going to say hide rows. Great. Now I need one to show my rows. So I'm going to go back to Developer, insert a button again, and this time I'm going to say show 0 rows, click OK, and I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to say show rows. Okay, so now I just want to move these so they're all aligned, and you may want to resize them and make them look prettier or neater. And then what I can do is I can now use these buttons to actually populate the data. So I can go hide my rows, and then I go, okay, maybe I want to show my rows. And then it shows your rows for you. So then I looked at this code and I was like, that's really cool. But what I really want to do is I want to basically do that process all in one. Because when I run the report out, I don't want to go and have to click on hide rows and then show rows and then hide rows again. So what I did is I used the code that was given, and then let me just copy it here, and I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to go to my Developer tab again, Visual Basic. Again, I'm still on my same worksheet. I like to put some spaces in between my different macros, and I'm going to paste that macro in. I've called it Update Selection because what I wanted to do is I wanted to unhide all my rows. If anything is now got values in it, I wanted to then show those rows and then hide all the other 0 rows. So I use exactly the same code as above, but basically I've put it into one button. So as you can see, it sets my details at the top there, and this basically will unhide, and this will rehide all the rows again. So I haven't used any other code. That's what I've created. So I'm going to click Save, go back. I'm going to add a button because I like buttons. Okay. And I'm going to say I want to make it Update Selection. Again, I'm going to rename that. I'm just going to say Update. Okay. And what I can do is I can then just hide this and pretend we've just run it out previously, and now we come back the next month, and now we want to update. So there might be hidden amounts there, so we want to update it, then unhides and then rehides everything for me. Then I was thinking, okay, cool, but a name range would be great. So this is where I applied a name range to that particular format. So all I did was I went to Google. I'm not a macro writer, so I searched on Google and I found the code that I needed, and I just tweaked the code that we had. So if we look at the code over here, let's place it in my developer tab again. Again, let me just leave some spaces there. And as you can see, what I've done is I've set a range this time. Now, when you get this code, all you need to do is make sure the worksheet is correct. So we need to change what I've put here, income statement current, and we need to make sure the name range is named the same or rename the name range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my workbook, rename, I'm going to copy that name, and then I'm going to go back to my macro. Then I'm going to change the name of the worksheet, and I need to create this hide show rows. So I'm going to copy that name, and I'm then going to go and I'm going to show everything. I'm going to highlight all my accounts, and you would do this once. Okay, so I'm holding the control key down, selecting the areas that I want to be updated. So scroll down a bit more. There, that one, and these ones here, and these ones here. Perfect. Now I'm going to create a name range. To create a name range, all you need to do is go to Formulas, you go to Define a Name Range. I'm going to paste that name range that I used in my macro, and I'm going to click OK. It's as simple as that. So now what I need to do is I need to go back to my macros, and I need to then save it. Okay. Before I save it, as you can see, all I've done is I'm using the exact same code as above, but I've left out the top part, okay, and the message boxes. So it's just making my code a little bit neater. Then I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back to my workbook, and I'm going to click on Update. Oh, I need to add my button. So Developer, Insert, Button. Let's just add that. And I'm going to update name range. Click OK. Just rename that. And you can see I've selected G, and what it will do is it will now go and look at that name range and update it for me. And there you have your 4 buttons that basically help you manage your report or layout better. It also allows to save time because then you don't have to individually go and do it. So the other layout that I want to cover is an income statement for 12 periods. So let me go back to my layouts. I'm going to click on Manage. I'm going to use my current period, and I'm going to just make a copy of it. I'm going to say income statement, actual 1 to 12. And I'm going to click OK. This time around, I'm going to columns again. I'm going to clear all my columns, and I'm going to go to add a set of columns. It's going to years, it's going to be actual. Click OK, and then I want current period. actual year to date, and I'm going to then generate that report. Okay, so let's change the year quickly to 2020 so I can show you how this works. And as you can see, you've got the different, you got the first 8 months, and then you've got 9 to 14 showing 0 values. So what you want to do is you want to basically hide these particular columns in here. So I looked at the code and I was like, okay, how can I do that? And what I found is this. So if I go further down in my code here, I created a hide 0 columns. So I'm going to copy that and then I'm going to explain it. So go back to my macro, make some spaces, and enter it in. Okay, so the first thing I need to do in this particular macro, I said I'm referencing a range, so I need to do that. So change the worksheet name. I think it's the same, but to make sure, I'm going to just rename, copy, and then I'm going to go back and make sure that's changed. And I got a hide columns name range. So what I did is I needed to identify which columns weren't being used. So if I unhide my period columns, you can see it's all periods 1 to 14. I don't know why it's got 14. Let me just remove that. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to basically be able to see what the current period is, and if it's not the current period, then it needs to remove. So I'm going to insert over here, current period, and I am then going to pull in my formula for current period. Okay, make sure it's referencing the right company. And what I did is I referenced or used an if function to say if my current period is smaller than that, then show 0, else show the actual amount. So when you're using formulas inside here and you're using if functions, I found that you needed to change this to a number. Okay, so change your, oops, let's just do that again. Number value, change your current period to number value, just put a bracket at the end, and then over here I'm going to reference my do my if statement or if function. So I'm going to go equals if, and it's obviously the logic test, it's going to be if period 9, okay, and I'm going to make that static, is smaller than, and I'm going to reference the period that my column is looking at, and I'm going to absolute reference that. Then I'm going to place a 0 there. Else, I want to basically put my column period number there. And then I'm going to click OK. F4, yes, and then I'm going to close my brackets. That's right. Okay, let me just make sure this is also a number. And then I just want to remove the zeros. Make sure this is numbers. If 9 smaller than 0, else. Yep. Let's just type 9 in there for now. Just do this again. Equals if 9 smaller than my period 0, else we're going to make it the period and then close it. That's weird. Let's just check something. This was giving me problems yesterday. Hang on. There we are. It's just playing with me a bit. Okay. And because I used absolute referencing there, I can now click and drag. And you can see, because period 9 is what I've selected, I have period 9 over here. So if I change it to period 8, okay, you can see it then updates my if function. Then I said, okay, so now we want to basically hide these additional columns that we have here. Remembering, if you're going to use this current period, I'd make sure you update your formulas over here to not look at current period there. I would use it, change that to look at my actual current period up here, and then press enter. I'm just going to drag that down for my sales to show you. I will send you this workbook, just by the way. Okay. Did that work? Yes. Okay. Then what I want to do is I want to go and apply my hard columns. So let's go, and I created that already, didn't I? Yes. So I can then go and add the button. So insert button. And I'm going to say hide 0 column rows. And remembering, inside that format, we had a name range of hard columns. So I'm just going to highlight that, and I'm going to create that name range, which is going to be looking at this particular name range over here. So again, the formulas, define, give it a name, and click OK. Now what I can do is just edit that button and say hide columns, and what I can do is click on hide columns now, and then that hides my columns for me, which is great. But if you are allowing the user to change this period, you may want to then put in additional coding to basically unhide and then rehide any 0 columns like I have. So what I did is I went in and I had a look at, where is it? Over here. I said update columns and rows, and I basically first looked at the rows, and then I added the columns at the bottom, hide columns at the bottom here. Okay, so to do that, hide the columns and the rows, I added a calculation. Okay, as I mentioned, you can either use the year to date, or you could use a calculation of your own. So if I go in quickly and add a calculation of my own, I'm going to say okay, make that bigger, and all I'm doing is I'm going to sum that. Just do that again. But this time I only want to pull in my 12 periods, so let me just escape that. Unhide. Bring that in a bit. I'm going to select all 12 periods or columns, and then I'm going to press enter, and then I'm going to click and drag that down. Okay, so that will then identify which rows need to be hidden because they are 0. Okay, let's just hide this one for now. Then what I did is I applied this to my calculation. So I went in to developer, Visual Basics, and I went down and let's paste my code in there now. Just this one here. Copy. Again, I'm going to just place it at the bottom. And I need to make sure that everything is referenced correctly. So over here is income statement 1 to 12, which is fine. And the range I'm going to use, and I need to set up, is going to be the calculation range. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that. So let's do that first. And it's going to be this range over here. Obviously, you would make it for your whole layout. I'm just doing this for now. And then I'm going to formulas, define, it's going to be a calculation, and I'm going to click OK. Then go back to my macro. Okay, so first thing it's going to do, it's going to look at the rows and see if it's empty, and then hide and show your rows. Then I said basically I want to then go and change, instead of entire row hidden, I changed it to entire column hidden. Okay, so whether it's true or false, it then calculates and then hides the columns as well. So that's how I created that. We already have the hide columns, so that's fine. And income statement actual versus, that's perfect as well. So let's see, save this and then go back and try and add a button for this. And I'm going to say, I can change, update columns and rows. I'm going to give it a name. Update. Okay, and when I click on this, it will then remove any zeros and remove any columns. So that's how I used it. And as I mentioned before, I will send the codes for all this and the Excel workbook so you can play around with it. Great. So now what you need to do is you need to save it back to the report manager, and you can do that by going to the report manager, clicking on your report that you want to save, and save, and then you need to change this particular report. So you're going to click on Save Excel Template. You're going to select your Excel workbook that you've got. So I'm going to change it to M there, and click OK. Yes. And there you have your template saved. Okay, so if you're wanting to learn more or find out more about the X Factor series, you can actually go to our learning portal, and from there you can select your integration, and you'll find there in the advanced section the X Factor series. We do have a lot of information in this learning portal, so please do go and check it out. If you want to connect with us, you can go to Sage Intelligence, and that's where you'll find your additional reports, your learning portal under resources, and we've also got an academy where you can actually do some courses on Sage Intelligence. So why not check it out at sageintelligenceacademy.com. We love feedback, so if you found this webcast useful, please do like it and share it on your social media channels. Thank you.